Oh, I can go anywhere I want in the world, dude. You don't even know that. I'm off the registry. They made sure that the last court date because, again, you don't understand the law. You have no concept of it. It's going to be completely obliterated off my record. You don't understand that. You don't know how it works. They made sure that the last court date because, again, you don't understand the law. You have no concept of it. It's going to be completely obliterated off my record. You don't understand that. You don't know how it works. And not only that, but the judge did me a favor because the petition is part of my case, but it's not filed with my case. All right? So when I take that and file it with my case next week, all right, within 48 hours, I will be off the registry.
The court would note that there was a Exhibit 5 from September of 2005 talks about in 2003 he contacted the agency for services. He was referred to the Will County Adult Probation Department. On 6/9/2003, he arrived late for the assessment. During the appointment, he did not deny contact with the victim, but presented himself as the victim and outright blamed the victim for the offense. He completed the second portion of his three-step assessment process, but he failed to keep the third appointment. And then he was eventually discharged from treatment. He, in 2004, tried to resume services, and he did, but then he again failed to attend and was kicked out of treatment. He was again then in May of 2005 removed from group treatment due to ongoing disruptions, lack of progress. There was a reassessment done. He maintained his innocence by blaming the victim, denying his intent. Reported that he was not going to continue taking his medications. Just a general refusal to do treatment.
That's not entirely true, Your Honor. I can rebut that.
Mr. Fredrickson, we're not having a conversation anymore. I gave you plenty of time to speak.
Understood.
Then again in 2005, he was reassessed. He was kicked out of treatment. He was non-compliant. That's in Exhibit 5. Then in February of 21, there was a report done. And it talked about the findings that he had emotional injury due to the acts of the detective. Again, there's victim blaming in that as well. It does talk about how he was terminated from treatment because he was uncooperative. Again, how he was removed from groups in 2005. So Mr. Fredrickson says that's not true. However, it shows up in multiple locations. It does talk about his narcissistic tendencies, which is always a concern for the court. Said when asked about alcohol consumption, he says, I don't drink often, but when I do, I binge. I drink to get drunk and forget my problems. There is a history of giving liquor to minors, which is of great concern for the court. This says, unfortunately, even if the defendant does successfully complete sex offender counseling, he does not stop using alcohol and marijuana. His risk to reoffend, not just sexually, would be considered high. Again, that's a going back years, but that's a concern for the court as well. The court would note during that evaluation, they found that he was mostly non-cooperative with a test-taking approach. So again, this shows a level of non-compliance historically that makes the court very concerned. There was non-completion of treatment. There was not sex offender treatment that was completed successfully. And a statement, I didn't agree with the counseling because I didn't have a problem. And again, this is going back to a 2021 evaluation. It's 2025. Now, he talks about having bad experiences with Linderos, and I believe that that's all very true. The clinical opinion given in that evaluation is that the plaintiff actively engages in impression management and is malingering. The plaintiff's expert failed to consider the issue of malingering and misdiagnosed him. Incredible evidence does not exist indicating the plaintiff suffered psychological injury as a result of his interactions with the defendant. Now, I think that the interactions with the defendant in that case were probably pretty traumatizing, but it's interesting to have that finding. It's a long way of saying the court really has a hard time knowing exactly what's going on, but what is clear is that he did not complete treatment successfully at any given time, and that's of great concern to the court. What I continue to see is really obstructive sort of behavior, and that also concerns the court. So there was one other thing I had looked at in these documents. Oh, no, that's a different thing. So it's a long way of saying this. The court has to weigh sort of the purposes of the statute and the registration versus the harm that has occurred or risk of harm. And I don't find the risk of harm to be non-existent or not there. I think there's some inherent risk with a registry of this kind, which again, federal courts have found to be constitutional. Here, I think Mr. Fredrickson does pose a risk. I don't see where there's been any successful treatment. I see him still obstinate in his behavior, and I believe there's a risk to the community. I think that risk outweighs anything he's presented today. The court is going to deny his petition to deregister on its merits. I'm also finding he's not eligible to petition to deregister. The crime for which he was convicted falls squarely within the statute, which excludes him from even petitioning to deregister. The court can't even hear the petition. So the court's going to deny the request for those two reasons, Mr. Fredrickson.
Your Honor, I wish for clarification for pro se purpose. You mentioned that I may have filed in the wrong court, or that I have to stake this up to the state's attorneys.
When you challenge the constitutionality of a statute, there's a process you have to go through. You did not go through that process.
Well, for all practical purposes, I have exhausted local remedy then.
You can file a civil suit, I suppose, but I can't give you legal advice.
No, I'm not asking for legal advice. I'm just simply clarifying that this here is escalating without the need for it.
Okay.
And unfortunately, it's going to be before I anticipated. Is that all, Your Honor?
That is all. The court will be in recess.